followed by the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point in the meeting, we will adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Thompson. All in favor? Becky, 5-0. We don't have any amendments tonight. Comments from the public? No comments, okay. Consent agenda items, 4.1 minutes, 4.2 behavior management consultant services contract addendum, 4.3 Willie Ann Glenn Act 2023 summer nutrition plan, 4.4 track and field schedule. Do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Ms. Hagan, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Knight. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Becky?
You need to get one from
Oh, we also had Mr. Carroll with us virtually tonight. Mr. Carroll, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you in favor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Becky, 5-0. 5.2, items for individual consideration. 5.1, Florida inventory of schoolhouses, the fish report. Ms. Joseph.
Okay, what we have presented is an annual report that Mr. Dean presents to the board for approval. It's our annual fish report, which stands for Florida's Inventory of Schoolhouses. And it deals with the space, the type of classroom, any permanent facility, and relocatable facilities as well as aging facilities. It is just a summary of that and what we have.
Of what we have. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the Florida inventory of schoolhouses report?
Madam Chair, I move to accept the fish report.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
I'm in favor.
Okay, Becky, 5-0. 5.2, personnel changes. Mr. Killingsworth?
Good evening.
Good evening.
This evening, we have two non-instructional employees for recommendation, that being Ms. McDonald for the district for the Maintenance and Transportation Secretary, and for Pinetta, Ms. Thompson will be the school secretary there. And then we have one termination, that being Ms. Cobb from Central. Those are the personnel recommendations that I'm asking for your approval this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a motion to approve the personnel changes?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the personnel changes.
We have a motion by Ms. Hagan, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Knight. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
I'm good.
Okay. Becky, 5-0. All right, thank you. 5.3 volunteers, Mr. Killingsworth?
Yes, ma'am. We have we have 9 names this evening that we're asking your approval. Ms. M. Verdell for Central School, Ms. D. Powell for Central School for classroom field trip, extracurricular clubs, Ms. A. Ratliff for Central as well, and that's mainly Boys and Girls Club tutoring. Ms. M. Botnia, that's for the high school, that's mainly for FFA. Ms. S. Clemens, that's for Central, that's for classroom field trips as overnight chaperone. L. Allen for Central as well, classroom field trips. H. Glavin for the high school field trips, Ms. D. Moore for Central School field trips, and Ms. J. Karaski for Central and the academy extracurricular activities.
Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth, for designating where those people will be also. Do we have a motion to approve the volunteers?
I move that we approve the volunteer list.
We have a motion by Ms. Thompson, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
Approved.
Becky, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth. 5.4 field trips, Ms. Joseph.
Okay, the field trips, student field trips, we have presented to you, Pinetta, 5th and 6th grade, going to Challenger Learning Center in Tallahassee on a Monday, May 22nd. And the grad bashers is the high school seniors going to Universal Studios in Orlando on April 22nd and 23rd.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Do we have a motion to approve the field trips?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the field trips as presented.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
Approved.
Okay, Becky, 5-0. 5.5 staffing allocation plan, Ms. Joseph?
We have no changes to that at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Joseph. Do we have, well, there's no changes, so.
So I didn't present anything.
We don't have,
You don't need a
yeah, no,
motion.
okay. 5.6 policy revisions, public hearing, Mr. Killingsworth?
Yes, ma'am. We're going back to when we had the workshop with the number of, actually for the first 7 or 8, asking for your approval on those and those alone.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the policy revisions?
I move to approve the policy revisions.
We have a motion by Ms. Thompson.
You have to open it for public
Oh,
hearing.
sorry. We'll open it now at this point for public hearing. Okay. I don't, there'll be, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the policy
Don't you
revisions?
have to close the public hearing?
3 times.
Okay.
Do we have to do that 3 times? Anybody from the floor, do we have to do it 3 times?
Oh, for the 3 different policies?
Yeah.
It's up to the chair, you can,
If, I mean,
but you have to make it clear if
you
you,
can call for it 3 times and then it's gone if nobody comes up to speed.
Any public input?
Once,
Public input?
twice,
Number 3, public input.
none.
Okay, no public input. All right, do we have a motion to approve the policy revisions?
I move to approve the policy revisions.
We have a motion by Ms. Thompson, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
Approved.
Becky, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Killingsworth. 5.7 Renaissance subscription renewal, Mrs. Hill?
What you have before you is the renewal for next year's Renaissance. That should include Accelerator Reader plus STAR. And so we use the STAR in addition to the state assessment because the state assessment doesn't show us growth yet, where the STAR will show us growth. And so we want to keep that one more year to make sure that it aligns with what we're seeing in classrooms.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the Renaissance subscription renewal?
Madam Chair, I move to push for the Renaissance renewal.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion?
just one thing, Madam Chair. If I may, if you look at that front page, it says subscription ends 6/30/2023, which is a little, it doesn't really match the attachment, because the attachment says the renewal is 7/1/2023 to 6/30/2024. So I don't know if they're trying to say what are they trying to say? The old subscription ends on that day? and-
Yes,
And then the new one
yes.
begins. I've got a question about the STAR. How often is this given, and who is it given to, the STAR?
We give the STAR K to 12.
K to 12.
We usually about a week and a half to 2 weeks after we give the FAST.
Okay,
It is given 3 times.
3 times.
And the students are really kind of doubling up on their assessments this year because the FAST assessment won't show growth this year. Because
Yes.
it doesn't have the same test to refer back to from the
Right.
previous year. But we do have STAR data that we can go back all the way to last year and see the growth.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Hill. And I did ask Mrs. Hill, I was interested in how often our accelerator, how it was being used and who was actually using it in the schools. And it looks like every school is using it to some extent.
Right. Not as much this year as we have in the past school-wide because we're focusing on the things that DOE is having us focus on right now. There are schools that are, encouraging their students to read at home and take the AR test, but that's a challenge sometimes. And so hopefully we'll get to a point where we can do it more at school and the numbers should go back up.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Hill. Did you have a
Oh,
question?
no, she might as well stay.
Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor of Renaissance subscription renewal, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
Approve.
Okay, Becky, 5-0. 5.8, revisions to the 2023-2024 school calendar.
When personnel worked on the calendar, the process is we have a student calendar committee, and that student calendar committee just really focuses on the student days. Once the personnel committee got together and worked on the teacher days, we needed to add 2 more teacher work days. And so for them to have the contracted amount. So we added 1 at the beginning of the year to pre-planning and 1 at the end of the year to post-planning.
Thank you, Mrs. Hill. Do we have a motion to approve the revisions to the 2023-2024 school calendar?
Madam Chair, I move to accept the calendar changes as presented.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
I second the motion.
Second by Ms. Thompson. Any discussion? All those in favor, by a show of hands. Mr. Carroll?
Approve.
Becky, 5-0. 5.9, staff travel, Mrs. Joseph?
Okay, the staff travel that I'm presenting to you, it's a Florida IDNR statewide training. That's your micro conference with Nick Gonzalez, your PACE Board of Directors meeting in Apalachicola. That's one of our annual meetings that will be with me. The Florida School Safety Summit, that's in Orlando, that will be with Mr. Rod Williams. The FADS and FSBA Joint Annual Summer Conference, and all of you are registered and all of you have room reservations. If you'd like to change your mind, let Ms. Bishop know. And then the Abbott Summer Institute is several people from the high school.
Thank you, Mrs. Joseph. Do we have a motion to approve the staff travel?
Madam Chair, I move to accept the staff travel request.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hagan. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Carroll?
Approve.
Becky, 5.10, financial report, Ms. Rainick. We'll try and keep this a little brief because I want to go over some of the pending legislation and what impact it might have.
I want to stress tonight, it's draft. Yes. It purely is draft analysis. Okay, but let's start with the financial report. As you can see with the general fund, we had revenues of about 14.3 million, but we had expenses of about 14.5 million, so you can see now that the expenses and the revenues are catching up. We do have a final audit report, which reduced our estimated unaudited amount of 17.58. It is now 16.6 is the final amount. When you start looking at those amounts, they tumble down. The smaller amount of revenue you have, the reduction in revenue, whatever you have in your fund balance, it looks a little bigger when the whole pot of money gets smaller. So we're going from 17.58, which is what we had, to 16.6 with the audit. Right now, we have a fund balance of around 18.38, which figures out to be around $192,000 for every point in there. So it's real easy to drop those points. There's only about 4.83 was what the discretionary amount was before. Now, if you take the reserves out of that, you've only got about 3.64 of that left, because it's 6.24 now. I know that's kind of fast. If you have questions? Okay. All right. We do have several audit findings. I know you were all copied on the audit. We do have some major audit findings that we're going to have to discuss with the board attorney. But we have some other audit findings that are still pending from the FTE audit. So all of those things will cause the fund balance to fluctuate. So just be prepared for those, because I'm going to go into some of the draft analysis right as soon as we're done with this. On the on the debt service fund, things are rolling along pretty good. Revenues of $190,000, expenses of only $27,000. So that fund is building up so we can pay back that debt. On the fixed capital assets, you're showing $1.5 million in revenues and transfers in, and you're showing about $900,000 out. So you're staying above board there. That will be part of my discussion in the draft analysis. And then you have food service. It's still on an upward trend, even though it kind of slipped from last month, but it's still on an upward trend, so we're positive that that's going to do better at $1.3 million in revenue and just a little over $1 million in expenses. And the 4200s, which is our covered donuts, all the title grants in that's pretty much had about 77,000 pending for renewal from the reimbursement. But the other three ESSERs are pretty flat, with the expenses and the revenues pretty much balancing each other out. So if it's okay with the board, I won't go page by page on that, and I'll slide into a presentation. And I'm not sure if they need to act on the budget before the presentation or not.
It's not budget, it's financials, right?
Financials.
Yeah.
It'd be good to go ahead and approve them.
Let's go ahead. Do we have a motion to approve the financial report?
Madam Chair, I approve the financial report as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hagan, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Knight. Any discussion?
I just have one question. What, the bus situation, did we get those are coming in?
We did order the 2 buses.
Okay, perfect.
So
Okay.
we're hoping that they will come in very, very soon.
Okay.
And I just want to say I continue to appreciate your little notes on this, your little side notes. It's very helpful. All those in favor of Mr. Carroll?
Approve.
Becky, 5-0.
Okay, now, as I told you, Miss Joseph hit me with a whole bunch of emails this week from the legislative session that she attended. And I have to say, I thought it was April Fool's Day, but it wasn't.
No.
And it isn't. But we don't know where the legislation is going. All we can do is talk about where it is right now and what that would look like. And that's what this presentation is pretty much about. I think the top one? The side one? Okay. Did I do too many? Okay. You remember we talked about this before. the Florida Education Finance Program, the FEFP. On this program, it's made up of a lot of parts and pieces, but the ones you're going to see highlighted, and I know it's hard for you to see, but the ones you're going to see highlighted are the base student allocation, and then you're going to see all of the different categoricals, because we're going to talk about those in depth in a minute. All of the different categoricals that add to that. And when you get all done adding the base allocation and the categoricals and all the other money, if you look at the last highlight on your right, it's about $8,300. That highlight on the right down there is what a student would get across the state, not just Madison County, but across the state, if you added all those things up for their particular county with the base allocation and all the categoricals. Okay. We do have a preliminary recalibrated for the February survey, but we do not have it officially blessed right now by the department. So this is looking at Survey 2 information. Survey 2 information, we had a 2,395 point something FTE on there. And if you take all of the full amount of what one could get, they multiply that times the weighted FTE, which is about 2,500, and that comes up to about 19 million, almost $20 million. And we talked about that before, how that continues to fall as you start looking at some of the other things. This sheet here, again, shows you that 19 million, and it shows you what Madison County would get if every single student got every one of those little parts and pieces at 8320. Okay? Well, let me go back. This is pretty much what's happening. You got base funding, you add categoricals into the bucket, that becomes your gross state and local dollars, then your gross and state local dollars, you add parts and pieces of discretionary lottery, you add the state funding to it, and then you have local funding, and it all makes a whole pot of total funding. And right now, our funding is kind of leaking out the bottom. Okay, Senate Proposal 2502. I'm not going to go over this line by line. Pretty much, they're proposing that they're going to raise about $2.1 billion for the FEFP total increase. They're going to raise some of the categoricals, the teacher salary, the mental health, the reading. They're going to pretty much keep the turnaround supplement in there. Now, if you look at that in about halfway through, you're going to see that they're projecting, and this is purely draft again, they're projecting about $8,568 on the second bullet. $8,568 is what they're projecting that the FEFP total for all the parts and pieces is going to be worth across the state. But then you look down at the bottom, you see what the average for the Florida Empowerment is per FTE. Now, there are proposals in there. Some I haven't been able to sort out, whether they're going to keep the family empowerment in the FEFP or take it out and keep it separate. We don't know that yet. But just so you look at that, what that kind of looks like for us, remember, draft, draft, draft. This is based on our third calculation. If you look at using the same exact calculation, which we already know is down at least about 5 FTE, just preliminary, and we have about 18 more FTE that's kind of pending right now. But just assuming those same numbers, that would mean an increase in the base student allocation of $182 per FTE, raising the base to about $47.69. And then all the categoricals will add up to about $6.4 million. When they're going to increase the categoricals a little bit, around $200 per FTE. So they're projecting that all of the parts and pieces are going to be adding up to about $8,500 per FTE. The overall impact is that we'll get a little bit of an increase of the Senate based on the Senate bill, how it is right now. But then we still have the impact of the universal vouchers, which are gonna come in, and everybody's entitled to do universal vouchers this year. So another pending impact. Now, the House bill is a lot different than that, although it still is projecting that the total package is gonna be about 2.1 billion, same as the Senate. They're projecting that the FTE, per unweighted FTE, is gonna be about $8,600. But what they're also saying is that there are like 9 categoricals they're gonna take out of the FEFP funding. This is particularly problematic for small districts, because small districts have the sparsity supplement. If they take that out, it means about $1.2 million to this district. Safe schools, reading allocation, instructional materials, all of those things they're talking about taking out, but we will still be required to follow the law and do all the purchasing and things that we're supposed to do with those dollars, all the compliance with those dollars. Teacher supply money, I'm not sure what's going to stay in or stay out. They're saying take it out, but I think they're going to put it back somehow in the top part. Mental health, again, like safety and reading, they're going to take it out, still be required to do everything. Fund compression, which also is kind of, if you have lower FTE than the state average, or your district cost differential is lower next year, that'll give you some relief. I think it's around the tune of around $70,000 for this district. And turnaround supplement, they're going to take out. We have one school in turnaround right now getting that amount of money. It's about $54,000. So we would still have to do those same requirements, but they would be taking that out. They're talking about $760 in the top. Unfortunately for me, this looks like they're taking $1.8 billion out of the bottom. They're giving us back some of it, but as you'll see, it looks a lot different when you start talking about dollar to dollar for small districts. If everything was the same in third calculation, we're looking at probably a final per FTE when they pull those categoricals out of around $7,000 compared to what we have right now is about $8,300. So even though it appears to be at the same level as the Senate bill, it still has huge impacts for the small districts. And I purposely did not make copies of this because it is so draft. I want to make sure that we have everything correct. Another bill that's pending right now is talking about capital outlay, the money that we get, the 1.5 millage, capital millage that we get in the trim every year. It amounts to about $1.5 million for Madison County. They're talking about striking the language that says we don't have to give charters any part of that money. The reason why that language was there, that we don't have to give them any part, was because they get their own capital outlay. So we got ours, they got theirs, we didn't have to share ours. But these two bills are talking about striking that language. They're also talking about that House bill that charter schools are entitled to a pro rata share of those capital millage dollars. And in the House bill, they're saying if we pay the charters any money for their capital outlay, we can subtract it from what we would owe them from ours. In the Senate bill, it's saying just the same thing, except they're saying you can't take out what you owe them for theirs. You just have to pay them part of yours. Here's kind of what it looks like using the formulas that they came up with. If we have 2,400 students, that's taken out the 72 in family empowerment. We got 627 in charter schools, 1,700 in traditional schools. If we raise $1.5 million, the district has to pay, it has to subtract out our debt service, what we still owe. So when you take our debt service plus the interest payment, you're looking at about $1.1 million. So you subtract that out of your $1.5 million. Whatever's left, you got to divide by all the kids. So it's looking like on the Senate bill, we would still owe the charter schools, the charter schools get about 220,000 in capital outlay already. So if we subtracted that out for the House bill, we wouldn't owe the charters anything for this, the way this bill is. But if, on the Senate side, if we subtract it out, we would still owe them about $100,000 out of our money, out of the millage money. Now, keep in mind, and that note is there for a purpose, capital needs are not based on a student formula. They're based on the age, status, and needs of the schools, the structures themselves. So these two bills that are pending are proposing that they move from thinking about the structure itself to a per-student basis. And OPAGA is the agency that the legislature hires to do their kind of internal analysis. And their latest studies also recommends that the funds be based on a need, not a per capita basis. Oh, let me jump back. Okay, there's another hot bill pending right now to increase the Florida retirement system rate. A House bill and a Senate bill. The House bill expands the length of drop. It increases the cost of living from 1.3 to 4% in retirement.
Wow.
It resumes the 3% annual cost of living for retirees. There's going to be a one-time bump, I guess, to catch them up. It's going to cost about $3 billion, and that's going to come out of the employer contribution rates. So our rates that we charge, that we pay for Florida retirement system is going to go up about 6%, which for us means around $320 a student. And it's not going to be added back into the base student allocation in any way. The estimated impact at the high end for the House bill is about $800,000. On the Senate bill, it's going to increase the cost of living by 0.67, raise insurance subsidies by about 0.34%. It's going to be a cost of $168 million to the districts versus a $3 billion range. And the estimated cost to Madison would be about $134,000 more in employee costs. So we talked a little about employee costs already, the cost of labor, salary, and benefits. This will be another increase to it in one way or the other with either of these two bills. So here's what you have. You've got falling FTE and universal vouchers. You've got, this is the Senate bill proposal now. Continue the categoricals and increase the categoricals by around $200 a piece per FTE. You've got the Senate bill, it's adding $182 to the FTE to the base student allocation. You've still got your costs of operations going up with salary and facility costs, and then you've got audit findings right now pending, not final, between $2 and $2.5 million. And you have an FRS increase from either 1 or it should say 6%, from either 134,000 to 804,000, and the potential with the Senate side of losing 100,000 in capital outlay funding. All, again, draft right now. What that looks like on the House side, falling FTE and universal vouchers, lose those categoricals, those 9 categoricals. It leaves the district about $450 short per FTE when you start figuring out the funding formula against what they used last year. Still have the cost of operation and salaries, still have the cost of audit findings. And with the House bill, you have the potential of an increase of 6%, closer to the 800,000 mark, but no loss in capital outlay funding based on the formulas that they presented to us so far. Now, what I did was I looked at just the facility costs per month, right now, as they are, only general fund. No capital outlay, no federal costs involved, just what they've spent per month by sites. About 25% of the funding that we've spent out of general fund so far is going to the 3 outlying schools. About 28% is going to Central. About 47% per month, this is average general revenue cost per month, 47% to the high school out of our 100% total. What it looks like is on the bottom left corner, average of the 3 outlying schools are costing about $78,000 per school per month so far to date. The Central School is costing about $363,000 per month. The high school about $619,000 per month. And the 5 schools together have an average of around $263,000 per month. So you've got some areas of risk here, some things you need to consider. This is just the same information, just spread out in a different fashion. Here's where your balancing act is going to come into play. You've got enrollment falling, universal vouchers, you've got public school funding is being cut, you've got continually rising expense of salary and benefits, rising costs of operations, and now you have the added fact of this legislation and how it's going to impact us one way or the other. Keep in mind, this is strictly draft. I want you to be clear because right now your risk assessment meter is getting pretty high. Questions? Ms. Joseph, do you want to add anything to that?
No, it's just that we need to monitor this carefully and be open-minded that it may change, but we just need to prepare, constantly prepare. We do know that funding will be cut, and how will we compensate for it? Because salaries are increasing, and you heard about that earlier. Funding is going to be cut, and that voucher system, we don't know how that is going to affect us, but that's scary.
Just keep in mind, for every $200,000 or $192,000, you lose 1 point of your fund balance.
You know,
So
they
it doesn't
have-
take long to eat into that.
And they have that school over there in Monticello now, I forgot the name of that Monticello, that accepts all children. They don't go through and accept the ones that they want, they accept all children.
All children.
It's right in Monticello.
So we have that. So if you have no more questions, I just wanted to give you a general overview of what is pending out there legislatively and what potential impacts it might have. Again, draft.
And it
Yes.
looks like they're moving along too.
Yeah, it does.
They're moving along without a lot of pushback.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Rainick. We appreciate everything you've gotten together for us today. Any more questions for Ms. Rainick? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Joseph?
Okay, I've got a couple of things. The first thing, I'm going to leave that to you to talk about. We need a date for the meeting with the county commissioners, and they're proposing April 19th at 6 o'clock at the courthouse. That's the zoning. When Mr. Reeves come along, he'll explain in detail about that. But that date is a good date, April 19th. That's a Wednesday
It's a Wednesday.
at 6, Wednesday or Thursday?
I think
It's a
It's a
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Is that a good date?
It's a good day for me.
Let me check my calendar real quick.
We need the first,
Ordinarily,
second, and
no,
third
but-
Wednesday.
That's
That's
going to
the
be the
third
third.
Wednesday.
Okay,
And,
good for me.
and I'm sorry, I know it's a Wednesday, but it's just, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of folks to get put together.
Okay. Okay, I need, Ms.
April.
Bishop will
19th.
confirm that. My next thing is that in light of the incident that happened within our district last week, specifically at the high school, I've asked Mr. Brooks to come here and just give you a brief overview of what transpired during that time. So, Mr. Brooks.
Good evening. Lieutenant, Council, Madam Chairman, and honorable school board members. As you're well aware of the events that happened on it was March 30th, 2023, approximately, I'll start at the beginning. I myself was at a training at the Sheriff's Department when these things took place, but I was well informed of everything that was going on by my assistant principal as they took place the moment they happened. My administrative team works as a well-oiled machine, and I would not expect anything less. At about 7:58, I was contacted and told that there were two female students that had gotten into a conflict before school, right after the bell rang. One of the students had just gotten dropped off. Instead of going to their class, they went to, actually, like they met up, as it was almost pre-planned.
You mean, fight?
Fight.
Okay.
There was a fight. So, they were separated, taken to the office. Both were given suspensions, and the day continued on. Sometime between third and fourth period, that would put us up somewhere about 10:20. Another fight happened between two females again, and like the other incident, they met in location. There was no, both are considered conflicts, there's no bullying. They made choices to do this, and they were separated, taken to the office and given suspensions as well. There were only two fights that day. Probably not 45 minutes later, while one of the participants in the second fight is rendering aid, notice came to my assistant principal that someone was in the possession of a weapon, a gun. The school was locked down. They identified the student. She called me. As well as you would possibly know, I'm surrounded by sheriff's officers, so we responded in kind. By the time we reach campus, they're locked down. We identify where the student is. They go to the student, isolate the student, search the student, and it was found that there was can I go into small detail? A .380 caliber pistol in the student's waistband. The student.
We the boys, you can.
Okay. So there was a .380 caliber pistol located on the student. Like I said, he was isolated, searched, Mirandized, and he was arrested for possessing a weapon on campus, a gun on campus. We continued to lock down to decipher more information to see if it was a continued threat. It was not. At that time, the cooperation of the district staff worked wonderfully, and the Sheriff's Department and my administrative team. We maintained the lockdown for some 45 minutes further, just to make sure this was just isolated, and it was lifted, and we tried to go back to business as usual, and then dismissal. So that was the day in which this incident happened. Like I said, there were only two fights before this, and then we went into lockdown to isolate the individual as much as possible and to find out exactly the information behind, if the information behind what we received is true, and it was true. The nature of school is changing a little bit, I guess, and we have to change with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brooks. And that Friday, we did do a search of all the students that come up, that entered the building, not
Yes.
only the bus drivers, but the.
Into the building, front, back, side, and the bus.
We did, at the high school, we just researched all the students before they entered the building. And we also had a debriefing with the administrators, district, school, as well as the sheriff's department. From that, we mentioned some things that we need to enhance. We appreciate what they've done. Thank you for what you've done. But and I wouldn't actually do anything different, but a few things we've talked about, we will be enhancing.
Yes, ma'am.
And to make it a little better. And I sent y'all 2 emails, and Ms. Bishop sent you 1 text. And so hopefully we've got that. We will be meeting with the principals tomorrow, and we will be debriefing with them also to make sure that we are all on the same page. One of the things that we do within our system, and it's a requirement of the state, Mr. Williams, who is the safety officer, he chairs a threat assessment meeting at all schools at least once a month, and there's certain procedures and things he goes over. Okay, we're not perfect yet. We're sad that this incident had to happen, but it lets us know that we are moving in the right direction. At the Central School, we randomly searched some buses and we were assisted. Two of my board members came out there and assisted, but we are working on it, and there's several other things. And as this progresses, we will send you a list of the various things that we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any questions?
No, not at this time.
We appreciate you coming tonight.
No problem.
Ms. Knight? No, wait a minute, Mr. Reeves.
As the superintendent said, we got the meeting set for the 19th. That'll be at the courthouse annex. Mr. Spitzer is the consultant. He's going to have a PowerPoint ready and be able to put the maps and everything on the screens there to have the county commission room. He is preparing a memo that he's going to get to me next week, and I'm going to email out to you 5 school board members as well as the 5 county commissioners, which will give you about a week before the meeting to look at it and digest it and everything. And I was going to specifically email, what was it? It was the ACLU that he was with? Yeah, and I'll specifically email him to make sure he knows about the meeting as well. And so other than that, just, please take a look at it and try to familiarize yourself with those maps, and then we'll have a presentation and start the process and listen to the public and all of that.
Because we don't want to be ignorant and let the county commissioners take over the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
You're welcome.
Ms. Knight?
Yeah, so I just want to take a moment to congratulate our Cowboy weightlifting team. I had the pleasure of going out Friday night. They competed in the district tournament, and we had multiple second and third place winners in individual lifts in the traditional weightlifting category, and they actually came in third in the district, which was very good based on the size difference. Not physically as individuals, but the amount of kids that participate in weightlifting for scoring between the other schools. So that was exceptional, in my opinion. I also want to say thank you to Mr. Self and Ms. Brown for their hospitality on Friday. We went out to Central School on Friday to assist and help in any area that we could. And
Well, how y'all know about it and I didn't know about it?
I asked to go out. Let me finish my statements, please. And so I do appreciate their hospitality and allowing me to come out and assist them in the things that they needed assistance with. I also want to just address the parents and the faculty and the students, and just let them know that, as you can see, school safety is being taken seriously. And there's some area of improvement, and there's some things that we know that we need to work on, and we look forward to just making you all feel safer in the future. I just want to send well wishes to Frankie and just tell him that we're praying for him and that we'll be glad to see him back. And I hope everybody enjoys their holiday break.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Ms. Thompson?
I, along with many others, have thought a lot about the events that happened last week. And so I wrote some things down because I want to make sure that I cover everything that I've thought about. At the time that I got the news that there was an emergency situation at Madison County High School, I was standing in Lee Elementary School, so I knew for certain that 3 out of my 4 children were safe. My oldest child was on lockdown at Madison Central, but I soon learned that he too was safe. My heart sank immediately, though, as I thought about the many parents who may not have known if their children were safe at the time. Since that day, I have pondered a lot of things. I have spoken with local law enforcement. I have done research on ways that we can be proactive rather than reactive in situations like this. I went Friday and met with staff members and principals at one of our schools, Central, and I asked questions like, what can I do personally to make you feel safer? How can I advocate on your behalf? And what things went right and what things do you feel went wrong in this situation? We cannot afford to sit back and to be complacent in situations like this. Our children are worth every ounce of fight that we have in us. As a start, I feel like we need more guardians trained in the Coach Aaron Feast Guardian Program to serve in our schools. And I would like for us as a board to explore that. I don't want to see a photo of one of our own precious children or staff members on the news as we mourn their loss, like what happened recently in Nashville, without doing everything we can to first prevent it. I am thankful for the wonderful resource officers we have and their quick response. I am also thankful for our principals, our staff, and let us not forget the Madison County Sheriff's Office under the leadership of Sheriff Harper. Your response time was rapid, and I am forever grateful for that. And with that, I thank all of you that played a part in making sure our kids were safe that day. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday weekend.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Carroll? We may have gotten disconnected. Okay.
Come back to them.
We'll come. Yes, Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, I said I just want to thank all y'all for your prayers, and I'll be back in a day or two.
Okay, well, we're thinking about you, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Ms. Hagan?
I would just like to say thanks to everybody for all the events that took place and all the people who participated, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hagan. I also attended a game Friday night, the JV game at the high school. I met with Mrs. Joseph this morning, just with my concerns, and we talked it over about different possibilities, and we came across with a couple ideas. I was able to visit the culinary class at Madison High School during the shutdown, so I saw firsthand, I saw what happened firsthand, which I was very impressed with the leadership at the high school, the sheriff's department, and of course the students as well, because we were everything was fine where I was at. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed a wonderful meal prepared by the culinary. I thank Miss Mona for that. I visited all the elementary schools this past week to do my monthly lesson, which I enjoyed seeing them. I'm very impressed with each and every school. Not only the teachers, the students, but the cleanliness of the schools. I am very impressed. And I think that's all I have. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn our meeting.
We have a motion by Ms. Knight, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Thompson. All in favor, raise your hand. Meeting is adjourned.